Paper Mario, a series that elicits so many different reactions from different people. Some people fondly remember the old classics, and other loyalists really only think of the series' later failures and the bastardization of the IP. The consensus on these games is very consistent among fans typically. For example, you'd be hard-pressed to find someone who doesn't love the Thousand Year Door. It'd also be equally hard to find someone who truly defends Sticker Star to its core. Although this game isn't half as bad as people say, fight me. Anyway, the point I'm making here is that the community consensus in this series is pretty damn consistent, but with one exception. 2007's Super Paper Mario. This is a game that some people find super underwhelming, while others find it to be a series high. And really, can you blame either of these people? Realistically speaking, you could blame this game for being the start of the series' mediocre downfall. But on the total opposite spectrum, you can't really hate the game for trying to branch out a slight bit and changing the game's emphasis from its combat to its story. You know how Super Mario 2 was developed as a totally different game that got rebranded, which resulted in a Mario game that just really doesn't feel like a Mario game? Well, this game kinda suffers from that same syndrome, and let me be clear, this game was definitely developed as a Paper Mario game, but it feels absolutely nothing like one. For starters, the turn-based combat has been completely removed and replaced with traditional Mario stomping, along some other tools for offense and defense. But they did happen to hang on to the XP system, but once again, it's a little bit simplified. Alongside this, you might note that the game is acutely linear compared to its older counterparts, and a lot of the exploration just feels a bit less natural. While writing the script, I kinda struggled to come up with a proper way to talk about this game just because there's just so much to say at any given point, so I just decided that we're gonna go through the main story and talk about each chapter, and then maybe some of the optional stuff later. Sound good? Alright, let's hop into this. So, the game opens up to this super dense cutscene with a lot of super important information, so I'm going to try and cover it all here. Immediately, our narrator starts off the story telling us about a dark book capable of revealing one's future through prophecy called the Dark Prognosticus. And I swear on literally everything, every single beat this game story has is somehow linked to this book, or its straight-edge counterpart called the Light Prognosticus. And I'm just gonna simplify this for everyone here, because if I don't, your underdeveloped brains might overheat a little bit, so we're just gonna call these things the good book and the bad book, alright? Bad book wants to destroy everything, good book won't stop bad book. Make sense? Moving on to Mario here, just like every other Paper Mario game, we start off in Mario's house where Luigi has some of the most self-aware dialogue I've ever seen. It's also worth noting that there are multiple references to the partners in previous games, which is an awesome detail for the 5 seconds it's on screen. Anyway, a toad pops out and cries for Mario's help, saying that the princess has been kidnapped, and reasonably, the brothers assume that Bowser did it, but it turns out he wasn't responsible at all, and we get introduced to our game's big baddie, Count Bleck, which is a fucking terrible name. He also has the One Piece trope of laughing in such an unnatural way it's hard to imagine what it would sound like. Our villain uses the power of Suck to capture everyone but Mario after absolutely washing him, and this part is almost upsetting to me. Why not A, kill Mario, or B, brainwash him like he does every single person outside of Mario? This just kinda seems like a liability to me, but whatever, right? Bleck captured everyone to throw a seemingly random forced wedding between Peach and Bowser, and obviously Peach refuses to get married to a turtle, but through the power of some good old-fashioned gaslighting, she says yes. And again, this doesn't really make any sense, but through the evil power of Bad Book, making them get married creates what's called the Chaos Heart, which is something strong enough to destroy all of existence. And naturally, Luigi rolls up and jumps on it, effectively knocking everyone out and spreading them around Bleck's castle. Back to Mario here, we are woken up in Bowser's castle by a butterfly that can talk, and believe it or not, this is not a schizophrenic delusion. This is another main character to the story called Tippy, who's a being called a Pixel, a useful but overall bland replacement for the partner system, but more details on that later. Tippy replaces the title characters from games prior, which allow you to get information on your current surroundings or on a specific puzzle. She can also reveal some of the hidden objects in the game, which is used somewhat often for puzzles. Tippy introduces us to Merlin, a returning character who now finally serves the role as our guide and resident practitioner of just existing. Merlin explains that Mario is the hero of prophecy, and yes, this game is a fucking Chosen One story. Tropes aside, Merlin immediately lays out the basics here. There's a giant void in the sky that effectively symbolizes the immediate rapture, and the only chance at beating Bleck in the Chaos Heart is to capture the 8 pure hearts. Isn't that creative? Funnily enough to me, you can just tell Merlin that you aren't going to stop him at all, and it instantly game overs you, making you watch that whole goddamn cutscene again. Now, provided you do agree to save the worlds like most normal people probably did, Merlin's going to gift you one of these pure hearts as a little mini tutorial. Just like the Thousand Year Door, or TTYD for short, each one of these main 8 treasures, which in this case are the pure hearts, are used to unlock the next chapter. But in Super Paper Mario, it's no longer a set location you need to do these in, and you need to do some exploring, which is a nice change overall. Once you locate the next heart pillar, you just toss that bad boy in and the chapter door opens, and with that we are off. The start to Chapter 1 is the basic Mario 1-1 clone that plays out exactly like the original, except that the OST splices some of the original music with melodies from both the first game and Super Mario World, which is a super nice touch. We make our way past a door that we clearly need to progress through, but it's blocked off. So we're going to move on all the way up until we cross an empty house, and this is where we need to use that function of revealing hidden shit I mentioned earlier using the Wii's motion controls. After committing breaking and entering, we find someone who has a power to teach us, but he wants a ridiculous amount of coins for it, and if you just refuse for a little bit, he'll give it to you for free. Refusing dialogue options is actually one of my favorite part of the Paper Mario games. I mean, how many games allow you to just tell most of the NPCs to just fuck off? Anyway, our new power is flipping to 3D, allowing you to turn this game back into T2ID and use a third dimension. This might seem a little lazy, and don't get me wrong, it definitely feels a little lazy at certain times, but the way the director of the game, Kensuke Tanabe, explains it makes a little bit more sense. The way he explains it is that the idea of dimension swapping in a way allows for 2 levels to be present in any given area, which gives the devs a bit more room for puzzles. And don't get me wrong, this game would have been way better if it was a traditional Paper Mario 3D all the time style, but at this point it all just kinda gets subjective. We use this 3D mechanic to bypass some enemies, find some secrets, but more importantly progress to the end of the stage, and once again this game strongly deviates from what Paper Mario is up to this point. The game is divided into chapters like usual, and now stages 1 through 4 with a block to hit the end of each. This is something that I'm more than willing to say kinda throws me off in general. The game feels far too segmented for my taste, and I far prefer the older system of TTYD and having one of the big chapters without any breaks. The rest of Chapter 1 takes place in a desert where after talking to this guard that's stuck in 3D, we get let into this city where we get introduced to yet another one of those pixels from earlier. This one called Throw, which, you guessed it, allows you to throw shit. Tibby stays with you throughout the entire game, but the rest of the pixels can be swapped through a menu at will. Throw, in my opinion, is sorta useless and is used for a couple of puzzles and boss fights, but he gets forgotten about pretty quickly. But he gives us the ability to pass on to the next stage, where we get back into more normal Mario stuff. 1-3 is an alright enough stage, both having what makes this game so great, but also one of my biggest complaints, but we'll start with the good here. Some of the puzzles are pretty cool, and the stage relies on landmarks pretty well, creating a coherent experience. It also introduces one of Count Black's minions, Chunks, the dangerously stupid brawler whose teeth extend far past his head, which is mildly horrifying to say the least. He's also by far the easiest recurring boss in the game, especially once you get his patterns down. However, finally, I'm gonna get to rant here for a little bit, because this game commits the fucking felony charge of making one of the most stupid puzzles I've ever seen. The most overbearingly stupid of these being the stupid fucking dragon statue puzzle, if you can even call it a puzzle. This puzzle requires you to explore enough to find this obscure code on the back of a dragon statue, which you need to input on the blue pedestal, which sounds absolutely fine, and as an adult, realistically, this is a piece of cake. But finding this input without any indication of where to look or where to use it at is a complete fucking nightmare. And of all the weird inputs to choose, why the fuck would you make it the minus button and the 1 button to press at the same time? Why not just make it, shove the Wiimote up your ass and hope for the best? I mean, that's basically the same level here. I mean, obviously I'm exaggerating a little bit, but surely they could have come up with something a bit more clever than that. Moving on, that we finally get our big boss against Fractail, the robot dragon who's actually programmed to give us the pure heart. However, yet another minion of the Count shows up by the name of Dementio. Dementio is by far my favorite of the minions, and his constant theatrics and dramatic nature make him insanely entertaining. His design is also pretty slick, resembling a jester, not to mention his theme is one of the best in the game. Dementio uses some magic to electrocute Fractail and break him, resulting in him going berserk and attacking us. And I know this is the first boss in the game and all, but this is piss easy and more of a big cutscene than anything else. Also, I don't know if anyone else knew this, but when Fractail tries to throw you off of him, a very well-timed jump can allow you to land on his head again and continue the attack cycle, which I had no idea. Once the dragon goes down, we proceed to a special chamber to get the second pure heart, and the chapter ends. And every time we end one of these chapters, we get some story movement, obviously, but also some information from the past. Our first cutscene is of Black and his minions griping about Mario, and then one of them volunteers themselves up to go fight Mario, which is effectively every single one of these cutscenes summed up. But more importantly, we also start getting into the story of these two people in a bit of a Romeo-Juliet situation, by the names of Blue Mirror, a member of the ancient tribe of darkness, and Tim Panning, a normal human. These are absolutely vital to the game's story, but they take a little while before they start making any sense. After this, we get to play as Peach for a bit in Bleck's castle, as we look for a way out. Some of Bowser's minions here are also not enemies and tag along with you for this segment. But right after finding a dead end, we find out that the rest of the minions have been completely brainwashed. But right before Peach gets brainwashed, she gets teleported unexpectedly. Back to Mario, we get to Flipside and find Peach passed out in the middle of the streets, and naturally, as we all know, if you find someone unconscious, you need to make an extremely spicy soup to feed to them. After waking up, Peach gets caught up on the whole situation and for the first time in a Mario game becomes a full-time playable character. Peach, just like our Mario 2 days, has a glide ability for longer jumps, but also serves as the defense-oriented character with a highly effective guard mechanic just by holding down. Overall, pretty well done here. You can switch between Mario and Peach whenever you like through a menu just like the pixels depending on what's in front of you. Through a bit more exploration, we find another heart pillar, and with that we're off to Chapter 2. Now unfortunately I have a life, and I can't really get into this much detail with every single level in the game, but I will outline any and all important events and stuff that sticks out to me. But I mean, goddamn, do you really want this video to be any longer? So, Chapter 2 starts off with 2-1, a pretty rudimentary stage emphasizing the importance of Peach's glide, and we also get introduced to Pixel number 2, Boomer, who is literally just an IED that you can place and either use in combat or to break some blocks and cracked walls with. Overall, one of my favorite pixels in the game. The level ends with us finding a mansion that we get to explore throughout the rest of the chapter. This is one of my favorite parts of the game actually, with the game cleverly showing you that this mansion is quite tricky and as are its inhabitants. 2-3 is probably one of the most memorable parts of the game for people as you break a vase and as the housemaid Mimi enslaves you to pay it off through manual labor. The vase is apparently worth 1 million rubies, which even efficiently takes an ungodly amount of time to get. Now returning players will remember the stuff that makes this a 4-minute stage, but I decided to do this way most people would without cheating. You start in the low-tier labor room where a man with a whip forces you to jump into a block to earn about 1 ruby per jump. You do this about 110 times and you're going to have enough to purchase some secrets. One secret tells you about the newest pixel you'll find by the name of Slim, who can turn you even more paper thin than you actually are and avoid any damage just by standing still, alongside squeeze through any tight gaps. Your next secret gives you the code to the VIP workroom, which earns substantially more rubies. Run in the hamster wheels for about 7-ish minutes and you'll have enough to learn about the code to the upstairs vault containing all 1 million rubies needed to pay off your debt. Bring down the Mimi's desk and she literally just fucking explodes, which should traumatize most people I'd imagine, but Mario's cold, pupilless eyes remain unchanged, which by the way is fucking horrifying. And before we move on, I came across this video during the script writing process of this one, of this dude who manually collected all 1 million rubies. Go give it a watch. Anyways, this directly leads us to the basement where the person protecting the pure heart named Merly leads us to be very careful of imposters and illusions. This stage is alright, really just being a big maze for a little while until you find Merly herself, until the same apparition from earlier pops up telling you that this is a direct fake, and after being caught red-handed, Mimi literally snaps her fucking neck and does this shit. Just watch. This shit looks corny as fuck today, but realistically as a kid, this was fucking traumatizing. I'm not sure who at Nintendo okayed this, but right after this, the spider from hell chases you down the basement, forcing you to make very quick decisions to get to the real Merly ASAP. But once you find her, Mimi copies her appearance once again, and it becomes a mystery on who's the real and who's fake. The obvious answer to finding this out is to host a game show and interrogate both of them. I'm not sure why some of these questions are just like oddly sexually charged, but they do allow you to determine very easily which one is real and which one is fake. After choosing right, we get into the boss fight, and once again, we dismember Mimi, tearing her limb from limb. Jesus Christ, Nintendo. What the fuck? As a reward for killing someone in potentially the most brutal way possible, we get the pure heart and the chapter ends. Luigi wakes up in Bleck's castle and also tries to make his escape, but unfortunately he fails and gets captured and brainwashed. We get a little bit more of that forbidden love style story, which I have no idea how to explain in this format of a video. I can't just read the text without this being like a 12-hour video, and most of it's kind of a mood killer to be honest, but I'll do my best here. But it's worth noting that if you're not experiencing these for yourself for the first time, it's a bit of a disservice.
Alright, I say
Moving on, Chapter 3 is a pretty weird chapter in my opinion. First off, Tippy gets captured off-rip by a chameleon who's also a nerd by the name of Francis that the game constantly makes fun of. Another pixel pops up from the bush to give us some advice and basically tells us we're idiots for even trying to save her, and he refuses to join our party. After trudging along a little bit through 3-1, we find a big-ass castle filled with classic enemies, and lo and behold, Bowser had moved in, and instinctively Mario commits several counts of domestic terrorism and bombing a public place, which would both warrant life sentences. And for once here, I'm on Bowser's side and wanting to kick Mario's ass, but of course that isn't what happens, and Peach manages to convince him to join the party, making him our third character. Bowser's more so focused on offense, and he has his trademark Fire Breath and also deals insane damage compared to anyone else. He's most likely going to be your go-to in any boss fight. Afterwards, we have ourselves a good old-fashioned water stage and also a new pixel that just allows you to ground pound a couple of labeled pillars. Kinda lame in my opinion, but at least we get a boss fight here with a big-ass squid. And it's the easiest fight in the game. Once again, water levels are the worst in every game ever. Our next level features a big-ass tree that we need to scale, and I actually love this stage. The puzzles are just obvious enough to make you think about them for a little bit, but not enough to break the pace of the level. We use Bowser to set fire on the tree like a true Californian and thus finish climbing, where Dementio waits for us at the top and transports us to a dimension where he claims to be substantially more powerful. Dementio is the classic, make a clone-styled character that just kind of is a gimmick and is really easy to crush either way. Afterwards though, we get a very interesting cutscene where Dementio says that we're getting stronger, but he needs us to be stronger for when the time is right, thus kind of implying that Dementio is possibly an ally of ours or someone with just ulterior motives. The final part of the chapter is easily its best, where we get to infiltrate that chameleon's castle, and Francis, he's just a fucking weirdo, man. Every goddamn thing in that castle is cat-themed or maid-themed. He also imprisons Tippy in a steel cage alongside imprisoning another pixel in the basement. This pixel's name is Carrie, and it's probably the best pixel in the game just for the momentum speed alone. Tippy is being held behind a giant cat door which takes 2 keys to unlock, each hidden in separate wings of the castle. Francis also has tons of posters and plushies of partners and characters from previous games, which is actually a really cool nod. The character Francis in general is just Nintendo's way of flaming a bunch of fucking people. Francis is incapable of speaking to women and also canonically goes on gaming forums and reviews games he's never played. His giant cat door thingy also only opens to either women or himself, so you can either only enter the room as Peach or the door will shoot at you. Francis panics when he sees a real woman and boots off a software that resembles a dating sim, or at least what probably looks like one. I have never used one of these before, I promise. I love that you can just let the intrusive thoughts win at any point and just be a complete dickhead to him. And whoever made it to where you can ask him how much money he makes is a fucking demon. After Peach gets pissed off, she uses a bomb to start the boss fight, and I am not a fan of this boss at all. Francis can just negate your damage whenever the fuck he feels like it, and it's just kind of boring in my opinion.
Oh, hell no, man.
But once that's over, we free Tippy, and through the power of main character, she manifests a pure heart just because she's happy or something, and end chapter. We get another generic Blake cutscene and another excerpt from the love story, and we move on to Chapter 4. Chapter 4 starts off by throwing you into space without a helmet, which almost kills you, and our solution to this is finding a fish bowl, throwing the fish back into the sewers, putting it on, and then going back into space, which somehow works. I'm going to be as brief as I can with this chapter because this is by far the low point in the game. 4.1 and 4.3 are literally just giant mazes with nothing interesting going on, but we do get a new side character for a bit by the name of Squirps, which by the way is a fucking terrible name, but he's going to be our guide and resident literal fucking canon. 4-2 is the slightly okay part of this chapter, but I also find it to be super bland, and the pixel you get, Fleepy, is literally just a gimmick in every sense of the word being used maybe 10 separate times. I will say though, this chapter does feature a solid OST throughout, but it doesn't make up for the mind-numbing gameplay, and 4.4 is no different. Even though we're platforming finally, the dull aesthetic makes this part awful for me. I can't even be fucked to talk about it anymore, so we're just gonna move on to the boss fight. A mystery villain has appeared. Yeah, for some reason, some characters in this game just do a very specific solutions by historically non-amazing people. No idea why, just sorta happens. This fight's pretty cool though regardless, and it sorta reminded me of Cuphead in a lot of different ways, plus some of the powers are pretty cool. Also, missed opportunity to make Mr. L wear purple since he already had Waluigi's hat. After defeating him, Blake again just fucking mopes around, but at least with a little side story we get some progress. I'm not usually one for side stories, but they make this one pretty interesting. Okay, we are at the halfway point here. You doing alright? You sticking in there? You bored? You need some Subway servers or something? Here, we can do that. Here, I'll make it a bit more interesting. Good? Stimulated? Alright, let's move on. So far so good, but the first half of this game isn't really that great to me. I mean, it's okay, but a little bit stale, and the system itself is starting to grow a little bit boring. Having to, flip through menus just to navigate through small areas is a serious pain in the ass, and it can completely stop the game's pace straight out. But it's also here at this halfway point where this game goes to the next fucking level, and I'm not like level 5, which it does technically. Fuck you know what I'm getting at. Tippy falls ill temporarily, and we go to search around for the next pillar, and now that we have the necessary pixels, we can access the hidden doorway to a place with giant mirrors and blocks. These blocks all need to be hit one time, and I completely overthought this puzzle for like 10 minutes thinking it was some sort of complicated pattern, but once we're through this we get access to Flopside, the exact inverse of Flipside with all new pillars and things to see. There's even an artist who can put Peach's hair into a ponytail that goes away by standing in an elevator. Now it's worth mentioning that if you remember the location of all the pillars from earlier, you're going to find every single new one here in about 30 seconds like I did. Tippy suddenly recovers from her injury and we're on to chapter 5, where we also start to get into a moderate amount of challenge. In the world of craggings, a primitive tribe of people who use crag as a word in every sentence possible. As annoying as it is, we do have to help them out from a far more advanced species of flowers called Flora sapiens, which directly translates to wise flowers. For unknown reasons, they're being kidnapped, so you just follow them. And now we're back to this horseshit random puzzle thing again. After scaling mountains for a minute, we come across these 3 blocks which seem pretty insignificant, so you wander around for a bit, wondering, what the fuck do you do? So you just keep wandering around until you find your way back to the city and talk to random people. One of them give you the order to hit a few blocks in, so you march your way all the way back just to unlock a pipe. This is fucking egregious, horrible design, and you know the best fucking part? They have the balls to do this to you again with a way longer 20 plus input code. This is the worst level in the game unequivocally and the worst puzzle in any Paper Mario game. I know I said the game starts to get good earlier, but I kinda lied, that happens in a few levels. 5-2 is really just more of the same, but it seems they got their shit together and made good puzzles, such as these tablets which need to be used in a certain order to get our new pixel Crudge. But before he joins your party, he asks what your catchphrase is, and as long as it fills the amount of characters, he's gonna go up and shout it. Hey. Crudge unlocks the hammer from games prior, but realistically you're gonna be using this in combat more than anywhere else. Speaking of combat, we run into O-Chunks once again, but I'm sorry to report he's probably easier now than he's ever been, just because we have Bowser. After whooping his ass, he begs you to kill him with honor before Dementio interferes and saves him. The rest of this chapter takes place underground as you attempt to track the flowers down. 5-3 involves a reality TV show host who lost his crew underground and you have to track them down, but 5-4 is where things get really interesting. We infiltrate the facility of the Flora sapiens and we find out that they have fully enslaved and captured the craggings. And the way to progress is locked off by a scanner that checks for plant life or something. To get ourselves past this scan, we find our next and final mandatory pixel, Dottie, who essentially gives you a mini shroom on command and is by a mile the worst pixel in my eyes, being used like 4 times total. We find O-Chunks here once again, but Dementio this time has brainwashed him into thinking he's a plant. But he's identical and gets curb stomped once again. We take the plant on his head and proceed to the throne room, and I actually really like this segment, as it gives a full detailed history of an entire race. It also features a cool puzzle where we break the floors and hit these buttons to match the color of the paintings. Good shit overall. However, the boss is kind of one of the worst in the game after the first stage, and I'm never a fan of these boss fights where 99% of the fight is waiting for the boss to come down just to get a tiny amount of damage. But regardless, it's painless, and more importantly, we get a lot of story movement. Flex minions have disobeyed his orders and are planning a big attack on the heroes, but more interestingly, it's starting to become abundantly clear that Tippy has some sort of connection to the story between chapters, something that the game dives into in far more detail later. But chapter 6 is where this game goes from maybe a 7 out of 10 to, in all seriousness, by far the best Paper Mario game and maybe one of my favorites of all time. The void has now grown so large that it becomes a very real, intangible threat as we enter chapter 6. We notice how close it is to this very specific world, and we get ourselves a good old-fashioned tournament arc. We need to beat these 100 soldiers to earn a pure heart. Every single one of these fights can be completed just by playing as Bowser and breathing fire and then moving forward a little bit, rinse and repeat, but after a few of these fights, the king shows up himself to tell us that he's going to give us the heart early due to the impending doom of the world. But, surprise, surprise, it's Mimi once again, who wants to throw hands, or in this case, Spider-Man. And our goal here isn't even to beat us, it's just to stall time to the void. But back to a few more fights. There's not a whole lot of the soldiers who's even willing to fight you just due to the impending doom of the world. And to my surprise, we're too late and the screen goes white. We wake back in Flipside and rush back to the world stores to see what happens, and it's just like it says. Everyone is fucking dead. This is dark for a kid's game, but luckily for us the heart remains intact, but it's guarded this time by Mr. L, who once again gets his ass whooped by us, but later as a surprise by Dementio, who sees us as his opportunity to kill Mr. L. This once again brings his loyalty and motivation into question, but he clears it up pretty damn quick by ambushing the heroes in Ruin's house and fucking killing them. That's right, Mario fucking dies in this game, and even better, Mario died and went to hell. This place is called the Underwear and is also a clever reference to World -1 from the original Mario game. For your first time in your adventure, you are completely alone navigating hell itself until you come across the River Styx, which you can cross and find the Queen of Hell herself by the name of Jadis, who has control over life and death. The Queen asks you to find her daughter in return for sending you back to the real world and resurrecting the dead pure heart. On our journey though, we find Luigi, who's finally gained his memories and joins our party. Luigi is easily the least useful character in the game, being that he just has a higher jump and that's literally it. But regardless, we find the Queen's daughter by the name of Loveby, who talks in a very theatrical way using Old English to the point of being annoying. After sending Loveby back to her mother, we backtrack our way all the way to the castle where Queen Jadis finally sends us back to the land of the living with a revitalized pure heart, thus ending Chapter 6 officially. Chapter 7 takes us right back to the same goddamn place that we were, and we have to go through all of this shit again, but with our pixels this time. Once we arrive at the Queen's castle, we finally get something new. Loveby needs to go to the Over There, which is the game's version of heaven, but due to a freed monster, it'd be too dangerous to let her go alone, so we essentially have a glorified escort mission. We navigate the long vertical corridors until we come across a guarded room where the aforementioned beast is roaming. The guards let us in, and the beast turns out to be Bowser, which actually got a bit of a chuckle out of me. Bowser thinks we're there to kill him while Peach is out of sight, so he tries to fight us, and after being defeated, he rejoins the party. Also, quick side note, I love that the guards are called demons, but to get around the age rating, they just spell it as D-mans. It's a fantastic detail. Our next stage has us find Peach passed out from a heroin overdose, and the level revolves around our quest to find some Narcan and bring her back. Once we have Peach revived, though, we progress all the way to the final stage of Chapter 7, where we find out that heaven itself has gone under siege, and we need to take it back. Many of the locals called Nimbies, which are effectively angels, have been frozen, and we need to unfreeze some of them to learn that the bridge to God himself has been broken, and to repair it we need to go and find 3 people, each with an orb to rebuild it. Finding these people was seriously annoying to me, but I just hate backtracking in general. After climbing our way across the Rainbow Bridge, we find God himself alongside the boss of the chapter. The boss is Bone Chill, who was once one of the angels who was effectively cast out of heaven, making him the Lucifer of the Mario universe. These parallels are actually weirdly deep, being based on Dante's Inferno with the whole ice and six-wing things Bone Chill is going on. Bone Chill was after the Pure Heart all along, and goes on a full tangent about how the Pure Heart was cleverly hidden from him in the form of Loveby herself, and that her parents aren't even her real parents, and that she's not even a real person. The boss fight with Bone Chill here is pretty rudimentary, with you needing to grab these icicles that he's shooting at you and throw it back at him, but you can also alternatively use Luigi's super jump as a little bit of an easier option. But after whooping Satan's ass, we are left with a really hard decision, and all of a sudden, the story gets kinda fucking dark out of nowhere. In this particular instance, we learn that Loveby's parents always kept a close eye on her, not because they really cared about her, but because they knew of her worth as an invaluable treasure of prophecy, knowing that one day they would effectively have to kill her to fulfill said prophecy. Yes, in this particular instance, Loveby has to fucking die to become the Pure Heart again, making this effectively a suicide in a kid's game. Dementio reveals to Count Bleck that Tippy's real name is Timpani, which reveals to the player that Bleck's name is Blue Mirror, meaning that in case you did not see it coming, the 2 lovers in the story were in fact Tippy and the Count the whole time. The following piece of story showcases Blue Mirror's descent to darkness as he devotes his life to the Dark Prognosticus and becomes Count Bleck after his father supposedly killed Tippy. Tippy in present day is slowly coming to terms with the fact that Blue Mirror is in fact the one responsible for all of this destruction, and according to one of the first things she told us, Bleck would have to die to stop it. This is out of fucking nowhere, but the story beats hit hard regardless. But unfortunately there's no time for that. The end of the world is upon us, and we activate the final red pillar and make our way up to the final Blind Tower, and it seems it's time we finally raid Bleck's castle. Each one of these stages focuses on one of Bleck's minions and one of our heroes, culminating in a final showdown between the 2. The first of which being O-Chunks and Bowser facing off, and once again O-Chunks can be beaten without even moving, which is such a shame for how cool he is. But like before, upon losing, O-Chunks is quite honorable and asks for the warrior's death. Before that can happen, the ceiling falls and is caught by O-Chunks to save the heroes, due to the fact that they earn the right to pass as they beat him. But Bowser's too stubborn to be saved, and he stays behind to help O-Chunks. Once the rest of the crew passes through the doors, we hear quite a loud bang and the previous door gets locked, meaning we're officially down a hero for the rest of the story. 8-2 is a final showdown between Mimi and Peach, and I just want to take a moment to mention how great the soundtrack here is. It's eerie, but it's also quite fast-paced with a solid melody behind it, not to mention the ticking clock in the background really reinforcing that sense of urgency. It just sets the atmosphere perfect. Overall, Chapter 8 is the high point in the entire game. The black aesthetic, the tough enemies, the high stakes, it's just good shit all around. And after some shit talk, Mimi and Peach start a duel, and I have to say this is actually a really good boss fight. Being similar to some of the other ones, but with some new variety, and I got full utility out of Peach's guard mechanic here. After the 4 collapses, the door locks, meaning we're now down 2 heroes. To add to the compounding weight, there's no indication if the character survived or not, and the characters assume that the previous ones are dead, including Princess Peach here. But 8-3 is Demenio's time to shine, and it is a fantastic stage all around with all sorts of tricks and traps hidden, playing at Demenio's dramatic nature the whole time. but before Dementia allows you to fight him, he makes you play tag with him, which in execution is fucking terrible. We just walk through about 30 seconds of each chapter before flipping to the next one. I'm not sure if it's meant to be thought-provoking or something, but it just doesn't really land. But anyway, Dementia starts finally talking some sense and reveals he was truly trying to help you. Bleck states in the game that he wants to create a perfect new world, but Dementia reveals that Bleck was actually lying and he plans to just destroy everything and leave it in ruin. Dementia still wants everything destroyed, he just wants to create a perfect world after. He of course can't really accept his offer, and Luigi takes him on, leading to an unfortunately underwhelming boss fight, but the rest of the game makes up for it, trust me. Dementia decides to do a little terrorism move and kill Luigi and himself at the same time, and the door locks, meaning it's down to just Mario now, with him assuming that everyone is dead, until he randomly assures Tippy that everyone is in fact not dead. So there you go. So here it is. After a good 12 hours, it's finally time for the finale, and every part of this is done perfectly. We have our puzzles from before, but with now full-scale mazes and the looming knowledge of the Count being behind the next door. Once we find him, he and Tippy exchange some words, and it's time for our final showdown. Bleck starts off completely invulnerable due to the Chaos Heart shielding him, but after a little bit of taunting, Pure Hearts show up out of nowhere and just disable his guard, and now you can actually fight him. Bleck here is somewhat easy unfortunately, but he has some shit to throw you off like his unblockable void attack or his slowdown attack which he needs to charge up, but he goes down a little too quickly for my taste. All of our heroes come back, and this really to me means that there's a phase 2. Bleck's down for good here, but it turns out Dementia's plan turned out perfectly, as he turned Luigi into a sleeper agent. Dementia takes full control over the Chaos Heart and sends Luigi into a void to prepare for the final showdown. Dementia sends away Bleck and Tippy alongside his minions, and then the boss fight starts against whatever the hell this thing is. Just like Bleck, he starts off completely invulnerable, and for some unknown reasons, the Pure Hearts completely disappeared once we use them. Meanwhile, Tippy and the now blue-eyed Count Bleck speak to each other in more depth about the old vows they made, and those stories that we had throughout the entire game start to make a lot more sense. Then out of nowhere, Ochunks and Mimi show up again, and through the overwhelming power of wholesomeness, the Pure Hearts show up again and make sure that Dementia is now vulnerable once again. Also, I'm not entirely sure why, but it makes Count Bleck's eye red again. This might just be an error. I don't know. Anyway, back to the boss fight. I am happy to report that this is easily the best boss in the entire game and maybe any Paper Mario game ever. I seriously think the combat system here was designed with this fight in mind specifically because it works perfectly. The boss keeps a reticle on you almost at all times, making you always stay moving, and due to the size of the boss, we need to navigate these moving platforms to get enough height to land a hit. This isn't the most insane challenge in the world, but I'm a total sucker for the feeling of blitzing something far larger than you, especially when the game forces you to think on your feet, all around amazing. Neo goes down though, he accepts his death but in a spiteful way. He keeps a shadow of his power alive just to make sure that the Chaos Heart finishes out consuming all worlds. But Bleck teleports back to reveal he has a plan. Bleck opens the door to the place that the game started at, Bowser and Peach's wedding ceremony. Bleck tells us that as corny as it is, true love is needed to finally destroy the Chaos Heart, and at risk of dying alongside the Chaos Heart, Bleck and Tippy accept their fate and renew their vows to each other once again. Through the power of somehow, this destroys the Chaos Heart, restoring all worlds and destroying the Void once and for all. Mario gets knocked out and woken up back at Flipside where we celebrate the victory, but the disappearance of Tippy is noted by all, assuming she is dead, until Bleck's assistant, Natasia, wakes up and assures us all that they both survived. The heroes celebrate with a banquet of snacks and the credits roll. And just like a Marvel movie, we get a post-credit scene, if you can call it that, revealing that Tippy has returned to her human form and lives happily with Bleck somewhere. The end. Okay, holy shit, this video's long. We haven't even gotten to the post-game shit yet, have we? Oh, god damn it. Alright, let's just do a quick little recap on my thoughts so far. The game story starts off slow, but for some reason towards the end of the game it just does a total 180 and makes a genuinely amazing story, and especially for this type of game. I'm not sure I'm doing it any justice here, but playing through this without any expectations is a genuinely amazing experience from the story perspective. Gameplay-wise, I'm 50-50 on certain segments. I'd say the puzzles in this game are either great or horrible, and there's a little in between. And there's a lot of little things that just feel bland. I mean, just compare Flipside to Rogueport from TTYD. There's just nothing super interesting about what Super Paper Mario has to offer when compared to its older counterparts. But before I give this game an overall score and we leave, we gotta talk about some post-game content. So, just like the 1,000-Year Door, we have a pit of 100 trials, but this one sucks total dick and balls, with it just being a lazy dungeon crawler wannabe and a genuine disappointment. But the rewards for this are crazy. If you complete both the flip side pit and the flop side pit, you get unlimited 3D mode and a new pixel named Dashell, who allows you to move super quick. But I promise it won't save you the 3 hours it will take you to get him, hence why I don't have any footage of him for this video. I did all the trials back in T2ID for a video, which I may not ever finish, and I'd rather shit in my hands and clap than redo that bullshit 2 separate times. Another optional pixel that you did see in my footage is Barry, who allowed you to essentially parry any enemy's attacks and is overall an amazing pixel in my opinion. You can get him just by backtracking to 3-1 after beating Francis and get him to join your party. And speaking of beating Francis, once we beat the game, Tippy is gone obviously and is nowhere to be found. But Francis completes a complete robot replica called Tiptron, who acts just like Tippy that you can buy for 999 coins. The last optional pixel is Piccolo, who can cure you of any poison effect in the game, but there's like a 12-step checklist you need to finish. I don't have time for that shit. Additionally, there's an arcade you can access through the bar with a few mini-games we can play. The first is Forget-Me-Not, which is a basic memory game where we need to match the character portraits, only they move around occasionally. Our next is Mansion Patrol, an homage to Luigi's Mansion as we shoot at the boos before they hit us, which kinda reminds me of those Time Crisis games you find at an arcade. Our final game is Tilt Island, which I did not expect to go nearly as hard as it did. The objective is simple, just tilt the Wii Remote to move Mario away from the obstacles and collect some food to progress rounds. But what's so impressive is how well made the controls and hitboxes feel. I mean, I was able to play super cocky and get away with it. But there is one more game mode, but I don't really feel like unlocking it, to be honest. Let's just wrap this video up now. Okay, we made it through, dude. Ugh, this script is so long. It's gonna be a while before I pick this game back up again, but after a 15-hour playthrough, what are my final thoughts on the game? I think this game is absolutely excellent and excels in a lot of ways that other Mario games just don't. The story writers cooked up some fucking heat here, and I am so sad that I did not ever try to recreate anything like this since the game did so well critically speaking. And while I find the game's overall exploration and combat system to be somewhat mediocre at times, the game's narrative is what I remember it for, and overall I think this is my favorite Mario game, period. Maybe Bowser's Inside Story can give that a good run for its money. And I'm gonna give this game a slightly biased 88%. It is a classic in my eyes. Alright everyone, I'm sure you're tired of hearing my dry-ass voice for far too long now, so if you enjoy this video, I'd love a like and a sub, but I won't make you. If you have any future games you'd like me to check, please let me know, and with that, I will see you on the next one.